was a moonless late summer night, and I was deep in the woods alone. I'd planned a solo camping trip in a remote forest, but darkness fell faster than I expected. The forest was nearly silent except for the crunch of my boots on dry leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. With the last of the daylight gone, I could barely see the trail and knew I had to find a campsite soon or risk wandering blind. After a few more minutes of careful walking, my flashlight beam caught the outline of a structure between the trees. I froze, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, there was definitely a small cabin or shack just off the trail in a little clearing. It stood silent and dark, a squat rectangle of weathered wood where I expected only more forest. I felt a surge of relief at the thought of shelter, but as I stepped closer, a prickling sensation crawled up the back of my neck. The cabin was clearly abandoned. Its walls were warped and dark with rot, and one window was shattered. Jagged glass glinted in my flashlight's glow. The door hung slightly open on a broken hinge. I hesitated and called out softly, "Hello?" My voice barely carried in the still air, and no answer came. I nudged the door with my boot, and it swung inward with a shrill creak. Inside, the air was stale with the smell of damp wood and something faintly acrid that made my stomach twist. I swept my light around the single room. It was mostly empty, just a rusty metal bed frame in one corner and a small overturned chair near a tiny table. Leaves and dirt blanketed the floor, as if no one had been here in ages. The wind sighed through the broken window, and I felt a sudden chill that wasn't just from the night air. I stepped further inside, careful where I placed my feet. On the little table, I saw letters deeply gouged into the wood. I leaned in to read the jagged carving. "Leave now. He's coming." My mouth went dry. Was this a prank? An old warning left by some previous camper? But fresh wood splinters clung to the grooves of the letters, suggesting it was recent. The stark message sent a jolt of fear through me. I suddenly felt like I was trespassing in someone's hideout. Every instinct told me to turn and get out, right now. For a second, though, I couldn't move at all. I finally snapped out of it. I grabbed my backpack and slung it over my shoulder. Whoever he was, I wasn't going to stick around to find out. My hands trembled as I turned toward the door, ready to leave. That's when I heard the crunch of footsteps outside, very close. I froze in panic. Dry leaves crinkled under heavy steps, approaching slowly. I clicked off my flashlight, and darkness swallowed the cabin. In the weak moonlight from the window, I stood utterly still, holding my breath. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. A tall shadow filled the doorway. The figure stood there for a moment, as if listening. I remembered how I'd called out before. He must have heard me. After a pause, the person took one step inside. A boot hit the wooden floor with a loud thump. I silently slid behind the door, pressing my back to the wall. It was barely any cover, but it was all I had. The door moved slightly as he pushed it wider, almost grazing my shoulder. Through the crack, I saw a beam of light. He had a flashlight and was scanning the room. The thin ray illuminated the bed frame and swept across the floor. In his other hand, I glimpsed something long and solid, maybe a crowbar or an axe handle. He stepped further in, boots grinding on the gritty floorboards. My pulse pounded in my ears, so loud I was sure he'd hear it. When his flashlight beam swung toward the far corner, I knew it was my chance. His back was to me. I inched along the wall toward the open doorway, moving as quietly as possible. Every step felt agonizingly slow. The night air was just a couple of feet away. I kept my eyes on the stranger, afraid even to blink. At last, I slipped out into the night. The moment I cleared the doorway, I ran. Adrenaline surging, I sprinted into the trees without looking back. Branches lashed at my arms and face as I tore through the undergrowth. Behind me, a furious shout broke the silence, and heavy footsteps crashed after me. I zigzagged through the darkness, lungs burning, dodging trunks and stumbling over roots. I could hear him not far behind, cursing as he ran. Panic gave me speed. I just focused on pushing forward deeper into the woods. Eventually, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter and then disappeared. I slowed down and ducked behind a tree, trying to stifle my gasping breaths. The forest was quiet again, except for the chirp of crickets. I listened for any hint of movement over the roaring blood in my ears. Nothing. Maybe I'd lost him. I still didn't feel safe. After a brief rest, I kept moving through the woods, putting more distance between me and that cabin. Finally, through the tangled branches, I noticed a faint gray light. Dawn was approaching. I headed toward it, downhill, praying it would lead me out of the forest. As the sky grew lighter, the trees thinned, and I stumbled onto a dirt service road. I nearly cried with relief. I followed it to a small gravel trailhead lot, the same place I'd started my hike. It was empty, but seeing the clearing in the road meant I was finally out of the woods. Only then did I let myself breathe again. The whole ordeal felt surreal, like a nightmare I should have woken up from by now. Except the aches and cuts on my body reminded me it was all real. I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted. Maybe he carved that warning, or maybe someone else did to help whoever came next. All I know is that I was unbelievably lucky to get out of those woods alive. I won't ever forget that night, and I'll never feel entirely at ease camping alone in the woods again. Last October, I took a solo camping trip deep in a national forest in the Pacific Northwest. I'd done solo trips before, but never this far out. I wanted quiet, no cell signal, no other people, just me in the woods. I parked my car near a closed-off trail and hiked in a few miles. The forest was calm, filled with tall trees and a soft blanket of pine needles. I found a decent clearing near a small creek and set up my tent. There were no signs of other campers, no paths, no trash, just untouched woods. That's what I liked. I spent the afternoon relaxing, collecting firewood, and enjoying the quiet. As the sun dropped behind the trees, I got a fire going, ate some canned soup, and read a bit. Around 9 p.m., I let the fire burn down and crawled into my tent for the night. I must have fallen asleep for a bit, but something woke me up. It wasn't loud, more like the kind of silence that feels different, heavier. I lay there listening. Nothing moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. After a while, I started hearing a faint sound, maybe 10 or 15 feet from the tent. Not an animal moving quickly through brush, just the quiet crunch of a single footstep. Then another, slow, careful. I didn't move or unzip the tent. I just listened. Whoever it was, they were trying not to be heard. I stayed frozen, my flashlight in one hand and my small pocket knife in the other. Eventually, the sound stopped. I stayed alert for a long time, but everything went quiet again. I figured maybe it was a deer or something. My nerves finally calmed enough for me to fall back asleep. In the morning, I stepped outside to check around. Nothing looked disturbed. I shook it off, made breakfast, and thought about staying one more night. I told myself I was being paranoid, but late that afternoon, while I was gathering more firewood a little way from camp, I caught a strong smell of cigarette smoke. No one should have been out there. I hadn't seen a single person the whole trip. I waited. No voices, no movement, just that smell. It faded after a minute, and I didn't see anyone. I went back to camp, trying not to let it bother me. That night, I kept the fire going longer. I stayed outside my tent until it got really cold, then crawled in, leaving the fire to die out on its own. I didn't sleep much. Sometime after midnight, I heard it again. That same slow movement, footsteps in the leaves. Not close at first, then closer. I stayed perfectly still, listening through the tent fabric. There was a long pause. Then I heard what sounded like a soft cough, just once, close to the tent. That's when I knew it wasn't an animal. I turned on my flashlight and called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded strange in the quiet. "Anyone out there?" Nothing. No reply. Just silence. I unzipped the tent and flashed my light around. The woods looked empty, like always, but I felt eyes on me. I stayed outside the tent for a while, watching. No movement. Eventually, I went back inside and sat with the flashlight in my lap, fully dressed, just waiting. A couple of hours later, I had to pee. I didn't want to leave the tent, but I also didn't want to go inside it. So I stepped out, moved about 10 yards into the trees, and kept my flashlight off. As I stood behind a tree, I looked back at my camp, and I froze. There was someone standing right next to my tent. He wasn't making noise. He was just standing there, bent over slightly, looking inside my tent through the flap I'd left half open. I don't think he saw me. I ducked down and didn't move. My hands were shaking, and I remember my mouth felt dry. He stood there for what felt like forever, then slowly turned and walked to the far edge of the clearing. I watched as he stepped into the trees and disappeared without a sound. He never said a word. After he was gone, I waited behind that tree for a long time. Then I crept back, grabbed my backpack, stuffed in whatever I could, and left everything else behind. I kept my flashlight low and started walking the trail back to my car. I didn't hear or see him again, but I never stopped checking over my shoulder. When I finally reached my car, I jumped in, locked the doors, and drove straight to the nearest gas station. I don't know who that man was. He didn't try to talk, didn't ask for help, just watched. I haven't camped alone since. Last summer, I decided to take a solo camping trip to clear my head. I chose a remote area in the northern woods, a place I'd visited once before with friends. This time, I wanted solitude. I arrived at the trailhead late morning, parked my car, and began the hike. The path was overgrown, and it was clear not many people ventured this way. After a few hours, I found a clearing near a small stream and set up my tent. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or distant bird calls. As evening approached, I built a small fire, cooked a simple meal, and settled in with a book. The sun dipped below the horizon, and darkness enveloped the forest. The fire's glow created dancing shadows among the trees. Around midnight, I decided to turn in. I doused the fire, zipped up my tent, and lay down. The forest was alive with nocturnal sounds, but one stood out, a soft, rhythmic tapping. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but consistent. I tried to ignore it, attributing it to a branch swaying in the wind or perhaps a small animal. But the tapping continued, steady and deliberate. Curiosity got the better of me. I unzipped the tent and peered out. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting a silvery glow. I saw nothing unusual. I stepped out, scanning the surroundings. The tapping had stopped. I waited for a few minutes, then returned to my tent. Just as I was about to drift off, the tapping resumed, this time slightly louder. Sleep was elusive. Every time I thought the sound had ceased, it would start again. Eventually, fatigue took over, and I dozed off. Morning light filtered through the tent fabric. I emerged, stretching and yawning. As I prepared breakfast, I noticed something odd. A small pile of stones stacked neatly near the edge of the clearing. I hadn't seen them the day before. They were arranged deliberately, not the work of nature. I felt a chill but brushed it off. Perhaps another hiker had passed through. Still, I hadn't heard anyone. Deciding to explore further, I ventured deeper into the woods. The trees grew denser and the path less defined. After an hour, I stumbled upon another clearing. At its center stood a wooden structure, weathered and partially collapsed. Curiosity piqued. I approached. Inside, remnants of old furniture lay scattered. Dust covered everything. On one wall, markings caught my eye. Tallies etched into the wood, grouped in sets of 5. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. Unease settled in. I left the structure and made my way back to camp. The pile of stones was gone. In its place, a single feather stood upright in the soil. That night, the tapping returned, louder and closer. I stayed inside the tent, heart racing. Suddenly, a whisper.
Leave.
It was barely audible, carried by the wind. I didn't wait for morning. I packed up and left, not looking back. To this day, I don't know who or what was out there, but I haven't returned to those woods, and I don't plan to.